the next speaker. So the next two sessions will be about MOX researchers, MOX professors, of course, who will report some ongoing activities of the group. And the first one is Professor Piercesare Secchi. Let me say a few words about him as well. So Piercesare Secchi is professor of statistics at the Department of Mathematics, former director of the department. He received his PhD from the University of Minnesota. Professor Secchi has covered important leadership positions at Politecnico di Milano, in the academic senate, as a rector's delegate and member of the board of the business school. He was president of the European Center for Nanomedicine and coordinator of the Center for Analysis, Decision and Society, a joint research institute between Politecnico di Milano and Human Technopole. And he's among the founders of MOX20. So today he will tell us about the statistical learning for sustainable infrastructures. Thank you, Piercesare.
Wow, thank you. Sustainability is also one of the main driver of research for this very transdisciplinary group at Politecnico di Milano, where people from MOX collaborate with system engineers, computer scientists, designers, urban planners, on the topic of network infrastructures. Now, if you think about infrastructure, you usually think about road and railways. Here we are talking in general about infrastructures. Yes, of course, mobility infrastructures, but also health infrastructure, health system, educational infrastructures, digital infrastructures and hard infrastructures, energy infrastructures. All these infrastructures interact and build up the multi-layered textured landscape on which our mostly urban communities thrive. And the idea is that infrastructures could be the enablers of sustainable development for these communities. Communities that are characterized by diversity and heterogeneity. So infrastructure could act as harmonizer of this diversity. Indeed, they should not provide a service that is targeted to the average user, but they should be able to provide services that go specific on the needs and expectation of every single individuals, or at least on small segments or of homogeneous individual. And this is possible because now we can profile these individuals, we can sort of identify these small groups by integrating different sources of information that often are produced by the very same infrastructures. Now, this is the first big data opportunity I want to mention today, because it is big data analysis that allows us to pinpoint these differences among individuals. Big data not by themselves, but analyze it with the methods and tools of statistical learning. These analysis can provide a new information basis for building up for the decision makers to design what we call precision policies. Policies that are not directed to provide standard services, but they are targeted directly on singular individual. And of course, here the paradigm is precision medicine. Now, in classical medicine, you have a treatment that fits all, and therefore you generate variability and heterogeneity in the effects. Medicine is moving to precision medicine, where in fact it's the treatment that should be adapted to the variability and characteristic of the patients in order to produce an homogeneous effect. So we are moving variability from the effects level to the treatment level. Okay, Pasquale Ciarletta will talk about precision medicine in the afternoon, so I'm not expanding on this concept, but let me only mention the fact, say that it's not by chance that MOX was involved from the very beginning in the design and founding of this hub research center here at the outskirts of Milano called Human Technopole, whose mission is exactly precision medicine, and in particular in what is now called Center for Health Data Science, a joint center between Politecnico and Human Technopole. Now, of course, I mentioned the first opportunity. The second opportunity for the mathematical modeler is due to the fact that big data does not mean simply many data, but it also means complex data, big in complexity. And in fact, many people here at MOX in the past years, and I think also in the future, have developed new methods, new algorithms, new way to produce analysis out of data that are not standard, let me say. Like, for instance, functional data, where you measure, for instance, the temperature of water a long time, but observed in very many different locations of a stream network, where the spatial dependence is made complicated by the fact that it's due to the flow of water. Or manifold data, Riemannian data, as we were mentioning this morning. For instance, the covariance between the oxygen dissolved in water and the temperature of the water that you can observe on a very complex domain like the Chesapeake Bay. Or, for instance, network data, where, in fact, you attribute to the edge of the network, not just a number maybe, but a function describing the flow of people between two nodes of the network. This is strictly related with mobility. Or compositional data, where you capture the chemical composition, the background level composition, chemical composition of large groundwater basins. These are all challenges for the data analyst because they require the development of new mathematics, in fact, and new approaches to the analysis. Now, I mentioned statistical learning, but let me make a point here. I do not believe that learning is equivalent to prediction. And I want to quote here Carlo Rovelli, a physicist. The goal of science is not that of making prediction. Science also aims at presenting an image of reality, a conceptual framework where to think about things. Otherwise, the Copernican revolution would not have happened. This is what I'm synthesizing the quote from Rovelli. And so I believe that even in the future of MOX, the three classical dimensions of statistics will still be very actual. So, the first dimension, descriptive analysis. This does not mean simply to collect raw data. It means collect data from different and heterogeneous sources, transform the data, generate new indexes that are eloquent about the phenomenon that we are observing and studying. Prediction, yes, prediction, of course, with a range of methods and algorithms that go from the totally transparent models, where everything is described by an equation, and where you can see immediately the effect of a variable, so prone to open to interpretability, to black boxes that maybe are more efficient for prediction. And of course, we would like to stay in the convex linear combination between these two poles. And then the last dimension, prescriptions. Once we have done our prediction, we should be able to understand how the decision taken by the decision maker based on our predictions will impact reality. All of this, maybe through the analysis of scenarios data, all of this should be done taking into account and measuring uncertainty. Uncertainty, it's our mission to measure also the uncertainty of our results. Uncertainty is generated by the variability of the real system that we observe, but it's also generated by the modeling error that we introduce, the discretization error that we introduce to make computations, the prediction error that we generate when we produce predictions through our models, and finally, by the uncertainty about the impacts of the action of the decision maker based on our prediction. So I don't want to sound too preaching. I will show you 3 examples where we have been recently involved as MOXers into the design of precision, of sustainable precision policy. The first, I will showcase them. The first one is related with Casa Italia. Casa Italia was a task force that was established by the Italian government after the tragic earthquakes in 2016 in Amatrice. And the goal of Casa Italia was to design policies for the prevention, not the protection, prevention against natural risk. And the idea, in particular, with a specific focus on seismic risk. And for seismic risk, the idea was to act on vulnerability. Vulnerability not just of the buildings, but also of the communities living in those buildings. So our task was to measure the social and material vulnerability of the communities. Now, social and material vulnerability is a difficult concept because it's very local and context dependent. Of course, if you measure the material vulnerability of a community, you are thinking about measuring the wealth of this community or the poverty of this community. So socioeconomic factors should enter into the picture. But we thought that with specific reference to seismic risk in Italy, the age distribution of the community was also relevant, as well as the age distribution of the building stock. Why? Well, because an aging and demographically declining community, even if it's wealthy, but living in buildings that require significant improvement, is less willing to spend money to better the condition of their buildings because they're old. So they do require specific policy to be incentivized to do that. The usual policy that our governments put in action was tax deductions for everything. But that tax deduction is not enough if you have to convince somebody in investing something that will give a result maybe 20 or 30 years from now. Okay, so different policies for different communities. We ended up with a picture of Italy where the colors, again, red is bad, blue is good. At least there is homogeneity between us in the choice of colors. Red communities are those that are very vulnerable, and as you see, there is a very heterogeneous. This is a very heterogeneous picture of Italy. It's not just the south; it's also in the north. Unfortunately, many of these vulnerable communities live in places that are also subject to very strong seismic hazard. Second showcase. Mobility network. Here you see the road network of Lombardy, 70,000 kilometers, 10,000 infrastructures, 70 million people traveling on this network every day. Now, the problem is, in this case, monitoring and maintenance. If you close a bridge, because you want to perform some maintenance operation, you are impacting negatively on the people using it. We wanted to see if we were able to estimate the people impacted by the closure of a piece of the infrastructure, because we wanted to give a basis to the region on top of which to prioritize this intervention. So the entire infrastructure is represented by a graph with 37,000 nodes and 82,000 directed edges. On each edge, well, we estimated the flow of people between 15,000 mobility areas in the region, and then we projected these flows on the edges of the graph. At that point, we were able to estimate the perturbation both in space and in time brought by the interruption of a bridge. Here we see, for instance, the bridge that we are interrupting is at the center of the red pixel, and we see how this impact moves around and affects many different and very even far away places from the bridge during the hours, both for travels starting from those locations or arriving in that location. We thought that this was a basis on which the decision maker can start thinking about building up precision policies and maybe giving notices to the people that are affected. The same technology could be applied for protection if a disaster happens, let's say a chemical or something is spread in one point. And finally, well, let me talk about the shock brought by the pandemic. Now, the pandemic, of course, sort of brought a shock in all these multi-layered networks that characterize our societies. We wanted of course, for recovery and for early detection to be able to measure this shock. Here you see one of the proxy that we used, which is the daily count of death from all causes, not just from COVID, all causes, because we thought that this was integrating already all the effects of COVID, even those that were produced by the lockdown policies, positive and negative effects, okay? And here you see the densities, the provincial densities of these death counts. Densities meaning that all provinces are now comparable, okay? Based on the analysis of this data, we were able to produce, with a project that is called AlertCov, sort of early detection of the spread of the pandemic, and this could be, of course, used for protection, or maybe anomalies in the way the pandemic spread by downscaling at very, very local level those data that were, spatially downscaling, those data that were at the provincial level. And this could be used for, again, for recovery plans or for even protection in the future. So, take-home message. I believe that even in the next 10 years, statistical learning will be essential for supporting the design of sustainable precision policies, which will be implemented, or this is the opportunity we have, by network infrastructure. Now, all of this has been possible working at MOX, so I want to say happy birthday, MOX. It has been really a privilege and an honor for me to work in such incredibly stimulating environment in the past 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Piercesare, or Professor Secchi, for this very inspiring lecture about the contribution of statistics on our lives. Any pressing question? Please, Luca.
Sure. Short question. I was concentrating on the network analysis, no? Because network analysis is now a very hot topic also on PDEs on networks and things like that, and also stochastic PDEs on networks and so on. What do you think is the interaction between these two words? I mean,
I think it could be. I think it could be extreme because, in fact, we didn't use any model for the diffusion, let's say, of people moving around the network, but this could have helped us in providing us with some prior knowledge. You know, I don't think that data talk by themselves. They talk if you look at the data through a model, and sometimes if you have already a deep knowledge of how people could move around the network, you can embed the data within that knowledge or vice versa, and use that to better make prediction of what will happen. Here we are just simply saying, okay, if we interrupt the network and we keep the demand of mobility the same, we expect these people to be affected, and we compute the impact in terms of man-hours for the detours. Imagining that people will choose another road chosen by the Dijkstra algorithm on the road network. But if we had a better understanding, a better model for people moving around the network, of course, our prediction would be definitely better, okay? There is a second more difficult point. I mean, here I interrupted just one bridge. Of course, maybe you want to interrupt 10 bridges simultaneously and see what happens. The picture becomes much more complicated. I think that modeling could help. Another thing I want to say is that for instance, thinking about big data, those flows were captured by the usual way of capturing movement, so surveys among people moving around, something that the region does all the time. But if we could use mobile data, something that we have available, but it's just a matter that it's not public, okay, those things could be done in real time. And in that case, modeling could help in making things quick enough that you can just say on real time what's happening if a disaster, say, happens in a certain specific point of the network.
Thank you very much, Piercesare. As you all know, Professor Secchi and the next speaker, Professor Luca Formaggia, are professors in the department, so they will be around for some time, let's say. So for other questions, let's postpone.